Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome back to the modding of Isaac with Lyte. And I heard your requests. You want a passive item, so today you're gonna get one. More than that, you're gonna learn how to make one yourselves. If I cut out and have to edit things together, I'm sorry. Been prone to massive coughing fits. 'Tis the season to catch the plague. But let's get started, take a little look at what we're gonna be making. Good old Lorem Ipsum mod still has everything from before, with one fancy new addition. When we start a run with any character, right here in the start room, we get the green candle. So you're going to learn how to spawn in items, you're going to learn how to make the item itself, and as a little bonus, I'll just throw in a little tutorial on how to use GIMP. So we pick up the green candle. Hey look, we've got a spirit heart now. Learn how to add a spirit heart to your character, and then we head over here. Ooh, some enemies. Let's just dodge him for a little bit. Oh, he's poisoned. He's dead. He's poisoned. Look at how poisoned they get. That's what the green candle does. It picks a random enemy in the room and gives them poison at random intervals. Pretty nice, huh? Well, let's get to making it. So I trust you've watched my other modding videos. You know where the folder is, you know how to set up the mod, but we're gonna review a little bit just to be certain. So you go to your mod folder. We've got the previous mods from the previous episodes. We're gonna make a new one from scratch. We're not adding to the others. Shiny new mod. Green candle. Because it's good to get practice with this such that when you need to make one, you just can do it. So that initiates our mod. Then in here, we need a couple of things. Mostly we need structure. So what we need is a folder. Which folder? Resources. That's where we keep our stuff. In the resources folder. Since we're adding art, we're gonna need some graphical effects. GFX. And if at any point you need to pause the video, please do. It's better than just letting it all wash over you. So resources, GFX, and then in GFX, what kind of effects do we need? Well, we need items. But what kind? There are a lot of kinds of items. The kind that we need in particular are collectibles. If you can't remember this structure, you just need to go over into the resources folder in Rebirth. And it's all right here. Resources, GFX, and then I suppose if you scroll down to all the folders, which are a long way off, here we have items, and then collectibles. And then you've got all the .png files. Because that's what we're going to be making. Just such that you know, the one we're going to be working with today is Blue Candle. It's somewhere around here. There it is. 164 Blue Candle. And to make the changes, we're going to use GIMP. GNU Image Manipulation Program for all your image manipulation needs. It comes in 3 windows. I know you're used to things just being a window, and maybe some sidebars, but you've got this main window right here for working with your images. Over here, you've got your tools for doing things with them. We're not actually going to be using that today. And over here, you've got your layers. Also, not going to be using that today. Just need this main window and a couple of menus. So, File, Open. Mine went straight here because I've been practicing. I need to make sure it works. But to find these, like we did over here, all you need to do is go to where your Steam library is, where it installs your games. You need to find this before to get your tools. So just find it again, and then, hey look, those folders should look familiar. Resources, GFX, items, collectibles, and then 164 Blue Candle. Now that's one tiny blue candle. Too tiny. We need to zoom in. Right here, we've got our zoom box, which you can use. I don't really like that. I like using the plus key, because you can hit it real fast. If you can't see the individual pixels, you're not zoomed in far enough. This is the size you want to work with. Now, when making a green candle, everybody's first instinct is to rush over to the side and find themselves a color of green. Which is fine if you're a serious artist and want to pick out the particular color you want and know how to shade and highlight but I don't expect any of you to be artists. We're modders. We cheat. That's right. We cheat. So instead of finding green and adding green, what we're going to do is change the blue. First step, we need to select the blue. So you come up to select, and you select by color. And then you just click on the color you want. And then you hold down Shift and click on the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Congratulations, you've selected all the blue. But now what? Well, now you go up to the colors menu, which lets you do all sorts of things to the colors. In particular, we want hue and saturation. Hue is what you would call color. You just cycle through the various colors of the rainbow. And so you move it over to a green that you kind of like. Okay. Lightness is the black versus the white. Okay, so I want it a little bit darker than it normally does. Saturation is how vibrant the color is. So if you lower the saturation, it goes to gray. If you raise the saturation, it becomes quote-unquote more pure. We don't really need to do anything to the saturation here. The numbers, they don't matter. Just look at the color, and if you like the color, good. If you don't, keep moving it around until you do. There are certain colors that you'll have some difficulty finding just in hue because either the saturation or the lightness needs to change. So don't be afraid to move these bars around. Until you hit OK, anything can be changed. After you hit OK, some changes are irrevocable. If you completely get rid of the saturation, there's no coming back from that. You can't change the hue of black. It's just black. So that's enough on making the candle green. You just hit OK, and you got yourself a green candle. That's all there is to it. But we don't have a green candle file, because if we just hit File and then Save, well, it doesn't actually give us the types of file we want. What we're going to do is export it. Exporting changes it from the format that GIMP likes into a format that you like. And we want pings. Because of course we do. And so you navigate to your Afterbirth Plus folder, your mods folder. You go into Green Candle, Resources, GFX, Items, Collectibles, and this is where you put it. I know it'll take you more time to get there than it takes me, so I'm going to stall for a little bit. That's your mods folder, Green Candle, Resources, GFX, Items, Collectibles. Whew, that's a long way to walk. And then we need to give it a better name because it's not Blue Candle. So we call it Green Candle. You can add more or less to it. You might put your name in there, you might put a number such that it's sorted by something or other. For now, Green Candle's probably enough. And you put .ping there if it doesn't have it already. If you want to be super duper ultra certain, you can come into this big long list and choose .png, just to be absolutely certain. And then hit export. All of these are not going to matter to us. There are plenty of things in here we could turn on or off, change the compression. Just leave it and agree. People who made this program are smart people. This time, at least, we can trust them. And, hey look, now we've got ourselves a green candle. Brilliant! Goodbye, GIMP. When it says, do you want to save these changes? It's because we didn't make a GIMP type file. It's fine. Goodbye, GIMP. We're done with GIMP. We have our image. We're done with that. Woo! Next up, we have to make the item exist. So we come back to our main mods folder. Not in resources, the main mod folder, because now we need a different folder. A weird folder with weird properties that just shouldn't be. You know, like how the main.lua was in the root? Well, to make a new item, you need a content folder. C-O-N-T-E-N-T, content. And in here, you need items.xml. I'm just going to make a nice new text document. Items.xml. It warns me once again. I'm making a .xml file. Am I certain? Yes, I am certain. And then you open it up with good old Notepad++. Ooh. Yeah, we're good. And let's make this full screen. Boom. So now we've got a nice empty file. And if you've never worked with XML files before, some of this will seem a little strange, but you need to get used to it. Because XML is everything. For this, for making web pages, it's not bad. It's all made up of tags. And tags always open with a right-facing gator. You can say less than if you want, but it's right-facing gator. And then the type of tag. Items. Because that's what we're making. And then inside of tags, like the definition of the tag, are attributes, things about that tag. So what do we need to know about our items? Well, we need to know where to find the GFX. And we need to find the root of those GFXs, the bottom of where to find it. And so we say that equals, and then where we find it, GFX/items. This items.xml can hold all the different types. The collectibles, the trinkets, whatnot. So the root is GFX items. And then, just like our mods, we need version equals 1. And just like every function has an end, every tag must also be closed. This little slash in front means we have closed the tag. Everything in between is inside of items. They're there to describe items in a way that this sort of text just can't do. So in our case, what does that really mean? Well, we have another right-facing gator. Every tag, right-facing gator. We've got a passive, because we want a passive item. So in our items container, we've got a passive item. Shocking, I know. The next thing I'm going to put first, because it's really important. Not this episode, but next episode. It will be vitally important, and it's very easy to forget. So I'm going to emphasize it a lot. Even though we're not going to use it this episode, next episode, it could cause your entire thing to inexplicably not work. And that's cash equals nothing. Right now it's nothing. Next time it could be damage, shot speed, range, luck, flying, all sorts of stat type things. That's right. Next episode's about stats. This episode, it's fine. But next episode, this is crucial. Crucial. I think I've hyped that enough. Next up is the stuff you really care about. The name. What's the name of our item? Green candle. Simple enough. That's the big name that shows up when you pick it up. Okay, we probably need a small name then. Description. Okay, so description. It's green candle made of an odd kind of wax. It's a little subtitle that comes up when you pick up an item. Okay. And what's next? Oh, right. The picture. Worked hard on that picture. Better tell it where to get it. GFX equals green candle dot ping. And then slash gator. Remember how I said slashes end the tags? Well, you can have pairs of tags like this with the little slash after the gator, or you can have just a single tag with no insides. and then you put a slash at the end to say, don't look for anything to close this, I'm already closed. And so that's all it takes. That's all it takes to create an item. We have a picture, and we've got a definition. All we have to do is hit save, bam. And now we've created an item. It does literally nothing, and you will never be able to find it, but it is, in fact, an item. And no, that's not the end of the episode. That would be boring. So boring. But that's all we need from this. This XML file is done. So we can leave content. What we need now is our good friend, main.lua. If you remember, it's down here in the root next to metadata, which you'll notice isn't here right now because we haven't actually activated this mod. It doesn't make the metadata until we try to run it. So we make ourselves, no, not a folder. We make ourselves a text document. Main.lua. Yes, that is exactly what I want. And then we open it up, and once again, it's not where I want it. Over here. Okay. And now we're going to make our mod, again, from scratch. No copying, no pasting, just type it in. Use those fast little fingers. It's all about encoding variability. I know you might not have heard of that before, but if you learn the same thing in multiple ways, it sticks better. So yes, listening to me say it is fine, but actually typing it really helps. It's why you take notes in class. It helps. So long as you don't split your attention too much, it helps. So where do we go? How do we start? Think, think, think. How do we start? Know it before I say it. And local, because we need to start with making a variable. No variable, no stuff. What do we call it? Let's call it green candle. Because why not? It's the green candle mod, why not call it that? Equals register mod, type it properly, and then the name of the mod, green candle, and then the version. Everything's going to start like this. I'm going to harp on it every time. Okay, so that's all well and good. What do we need to do? Well, first, we need to know how to talk about our candle. So let's take green candle. We'll take our mod. We're going to add something to our mod. We're going to add a constant. Collectible green candle. I'm going to try to stick to the way the developers have been working with it, style-wise, to make it less jarring to go from your code to theirs. And for you to feel more deeply how they write things. So, all caps, it's a constant, never gonna change. And what this is the identification number for our item. You'll note, in the XML, we didn't define one, because you don't need to. If we're gonna have an indefinite number of mods active at once, you can't give your item an ID number, because you are gonna give it the same ID as somebody else. Conflicts, don't know what to do with it. And so, we improvise. Well, we don't strictly improvise, they gave us a way of doing this. So we ask Isaac to get the item's identification by name. Oh, and when we say Isaac like this, we're talking about the game itself. Not you as the player, not the enemy in the cathedral. This is the game we're asking for the ID number of the item. You'll note the Pascal case, capitalize every word. ID, even though it's an abbreviation, is still a word. I is capital, D is lowercase. That will cause no end of trouble. Ingrain it in your brain now. Capital I, little d. Okay, so we're getting it by name, and this is a function, so we have to use parentheses. What's the name? Green candle. So what we're going to have is Isaac is going to give us the ID number of our item that we reference by name, spell it correctly, and put it into this constant that is never going to change and will be available anywhere we need it. Okay, so we got ourselves a number. That number is how we're going to reference our item when asking, hey, does anybody have our item? Okay, so what's next? We need to make it do something. Well, doing things involves callbacks. So we're going to leave a little bit of space, and we're going to write our callback. We'll write the function in between. So our callbacks. Well, we take our mod, we use a colon. Note, we used a dot here because this is just information. Information comes after a dot. You don't have to do anything fancy. Functions, on the other hand, tend to come after colons. There's a specific reason for it that involves passing this as the first argument, but rule of thumb, somebody else's function uses a colon. Your own function, maybe not so much. So we're going to do add callback. And then you remember the enumerations for callbacks? Maybe you don't. And so there's a handy dandy reference in the tools under Lua docs. This is the documentation for all of the Lua. I know this looks intimidating. It's a big long list of crazy things. But there's only one file you need, index.html. Whenever doing HTML stuff, index is what you look for. This is the home, this is the beginning, this is where you go. And when you open that up in Chrome, you get something that looks like this, a big old vast wasteland of white. Because most of the documentation doesn't really exist yet, but there's enough to get you going. Over on the left, you got the navigation. We've got modules, enumerations. This is where you can look up any of the enumerations that you're not entirely sure of. So you come in here, modules. Ooh, let's zoom in for you. It's better. Modules, enumerations, and then mod callbacks. And then it lists off all the different types of callbacks with some documentation. This morning, they gave us some documentation, so now we know what gets passed back. Last time we did entity take damage. Turns out they send back all sorts of useful information that we didn't actually use. So it goes. So when they say callback is a method that takes, that means the function that you're going to call will have these things being sent to it. That doesn't mean that you need to filter it by a certain thing at the end. That's a whole other thing. Like when we were looking at entity player, that's what this part is kind of talking about. But even still, this is a lot of information, but it gets you going in the right direction. What we're going to do today, however, is we're going to do things post-update. So after the game updates, we're going to take a look at things. Because we want to do it all the time. Pretty much literally all the time. A lot of these happen once in a while. Some of these happen once each time you get into the game. But post-update is what we're going to want today. So we're going to come back into Notepad++, and we're going to do mod callbacks. You need the whole enumeration. You can't just use the little constant part. Whole thing. So MC post update. So it's a mod callback after the update. What's a callback? Well, Green Candle, our mod, is taking a look, seeing what's going on. If it sees that we are after an update, then it's going to do something. What's it going to do? Well, we need some sort of function here. So green candle dot on update. This is a convention from event-based languages like JavaScript, where whenever something does something, you react. So on update is when it updates, you do something. Now for take damage, you also have an extra parameter here saying when who takes damage. But for update's an update, it just happens. It's not particular to any given thing, so these are the only two things you need for the callback. Okay, so we've got our candle ID, we've got our callback, but we don't have this function yet. So we're gonna make that function. Function, green candle, colon. Remember, down here, we use the period, up here, we use the colon. On update. And what gets passed to it? Well, we could check the documentation. No arguments. Okie dokes. I'm happy with no arguments, so you just leave that empty. And for every function, there is an end. Okay, so we now have an item that at least thinks about trying to do something. But we still haven't made it actually do anything. So this next part will teach you a bit about some basic programming stuff. First, we're going to leave a little bit of space. Then we're going to put in a comment. It's always important to put in comments so future you knows what past you was up to. Here, what do we need to do? We need to have green candle functionality. Because before that, we're going to do something else. So what's the first thing we need to do? Well, if this could be a multiplayer item, you might actually want to go through each player. I don't know a whole lot about the multiplayer stuff and actually doing multiplayer things, but I do know how to code it properly. So we're going to make a loop. So loops, they take certain conditions and do their content over and over and over again. So it starts with for. And then you tell it for what? So let's go with for player num. Because we're cycling over each player number. Equals 1. And then a comma, which is basically saying 2. And then we're going to get the number of players. So we ask the game. I know you want to ask Isaac, but there's a slightly different game object that does a better job. So we ask the game to get get num players, because we want the number of players, and then do something. And just like every function has an end, every for has an end. You got that? So for each player becomes 1 to the number of players, do a thing. Okay. What are we going to do for each player? Well, first we're going to find the player. So the player, ooh, this one should be local. Don't want it to be a global player. It's just hanging out right here. So local player, we made a variable. We're going to put a player into it. You know how to get a player? At least kind of. We're going to ask game for a player this time. Instead of the number of players, we're going to ask get player, but which one? We're going to get player num. So it goes 1, and if there are 2 players, it goes to 2. Ooh. There's a small chance of more players, I guess. I don't know. Who knows with this thing? But you got a player, you got another player. So first time it's 1, you get player 1, put it into player. When it's 2, you get player 2 and put it into player, and you'll use it later. Okay. And we're gonna loop, 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 loop. What are we doing in the loop? Well, we need to see if they've got the candle. Because if they have the candle, we can do things. If they don't, Okay, so yeah. We ask if the player has a collectible. Okay? So again, you're using someone else's function, so you use a colon. And you're asking, does this particular player have a collectible? And if so, then you're going to do something. If not, you'll do something else. And in this case, the something else is nothing. Okay, so if player has collectible, which collectible? Green candle dot collectible green candle. Because we got the ID number up here. Et voila! We're asking, do they have it? If so, then do stuff. Oh, but what stuff do we do? Well, we needed to get a spirit heart, and we needed to deal poison damage to the enemies. Well, it's easier to just deal the damage to the enemies, so we'll do that first. We'll come back to giving the spirit heart. We'll leave a little bit of space. We'll come back to that. So, how do we deal damage to enemies? Well, first we need to know what enemies there are. So that sounds like another loop. Like you have to go through each of the enemies, yeah? So we're gonna make another loop. 4. Now, this time we're using a slightly different type of loop. So this first thing is an index. It's not gonna matter for this particular loop, but if you wanted to know which entity you're looking at, this is the index. For now, we're just gonna leave a little I. But then what it's going to give you is an entity. So we call it entity. So it's looking for each index and entity in a set of pairs. Which set of pairs? Well, we ask Isaac to get the room entities. And then we do something. Okay, so we might need to parse this out a bit. So we ask Isaac to get the room enemies. That's a function in Isaac. For some reason, Isaac tends to use dots rather than colons. Not really sure why. Everything else uses colons. C'est la vie. So we ask for the room enemies, but he gives it back in a table that has a bunch of indices and entities. So we need to cycle through that as a set of pairs. So you have 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 pair, all the way down as an index and an entity. So essentially going through the room, looking at each one in turn. Okay, for every 4, there is an end. Whew. Moving right along, but we're almost there. There isn't too much more. So now we're looking at entities. Unfortunately, entities come in tons of types. Even the pennies are entities. So we need to filter it down to what we need. So we need another if. If what? If the entity is vulnerable. Is a vulnerable enemy, actually. So the entity is a vulnerable enemy. Because some entities aren't enemies at all. Some of them are enemies, but not vulnerable, like the stonehead guys that suck you in or fire tears at you. They're enemies, but they're totally invulnerable. Oof. Okay, so if the entity happens to be vulnerable, then we're going to do stuff. But we're not going to do it all the time. So we have an and. You can use ands, you can use ors, you can use nots. Always use the word and or not. So we check that they're vulnerable, and we need a bit of random chance. We don't need necessarily the Isaac randomization yet. We could upgrade it later to include the luck stat, but for now, we're just going to do math.random, and then you give it a whole number. I'm going to give it 500. And then equals 1. Now, you don't have to do it exactly like this. You could have it be less than or equal to 7. If you wanted on average, 7 out of 500 tries to succeed. That's basically how probability works. You have a uniform distribution from 1 to 500. You could change it from 17 to 500 if you wanted, but for this purpose, 1 to 500 is fine. Less than or equal to 7, so that's 7 chances out of 500 for success. But I just want 1. You can change it however you like, because it might not poison them enough for you, or it might poison them too much. Making games is all about balance. And then you have a then. So if they're a vulnerable enemy, and you rolled a 1 on a 500-sided die, then, and for every if, there is an end. So, okay. Now what do we do? We finally got here. We're going through each of the entities, checking on them, rolling a die, and then we poison them. Entity. You need to add poison. Again, if you don't know how to do any of these things, you just come into the documentation, you go to classes, and then the type of entity you're looking at. If you're looking at the player, you go to entity player. If you're looking at an enemy, it's an entity NPC. And once again, the zoom went away. Okay, so entity NPC are enemies. And you're like, oh, but it's not here. Well, sometimes this entity NPC and other entities inherit some characteristics from a higher level sort of thing, like just a plain old entity. So if we look at entities, here we can add things. And here is where we can add poison, freeze, slowing, charm, confusion, all sorts of fancy things. And then it tells you what you need to give it, an entity reference, an integer, and a float. A float, it's a decimal type number. So 3.5, 1.2, 3.14. And so we come on back here, so we add our poison, we need an entity reference. For some reason, the player that we get here is not actually an entity reference. It's supposed to be, but it's not. So we have to wrap it up in a thing, turning it into an entity reference. So that's what this does. Entity ref around player makes it what we need. I don't know why we need to cast it like that, but we do. And then it asked for an integer for the duration. I'm going to say 100, and then a float for the damage, 3.5, which is Isaac's base tier damage. Okay, so we've got a thing that adds poison. Probably long past due for a save. Whew. Okay, we got 2 more things to do. Yeah, just 2. First thing is, we need to be able to get a spirit heart from it, but only once. This function is called all the time, so we need to know whether or not we have it. So at the beginning of onUpdate, we're going to add a little comment and say, beginning of run in initialization. So this is the stuff we're going to do just once when someone starts a run. So how do we know when it's the start of the run? Well, if game says get frame count, so it says the number of frames that have elapsed is 1. Then, and for every if, there is an end. So if the game has only seen 1 frame, it's at the beginning. And so we can do initialization sorts of things here. For example, saying green candle dot has green candle equals false. Because at the very beginning of the game, they don't have the green candle. Okay. So then we can come back down here to when we're saying, oh, they do, in fact, have the green candle, and go, if not green candle dot has green candle, then we do something. So if we disagree with the game about whether or not they have the green candle, that means they just got it. So this part up here happened at the very beginning of the run. We said they don't have the candle. Here, the game is saying they do have the green candle. We don't agree. So if not green candle has green candle, then we need to do something when they first get it. And so we take our player here, and we add soul hearts. How many? 2. Why 2? Well, a whole spirit heart is 2 half spirit hearts. Every time you're working with hearts in here, you're working with half hearts. Okay, so we've added some soul hearts. We still need one more thing here, though. We need to tell green candle that we have the green candle now. And that'll remain true until we start a new run, and then it's set back to false. You can only ever have one green candle. If, for some reason, you needed to detect them picking up a second green candle, I don't know how you do that right now. We'll check into that in the future. So we're pretty close to done. You might want to add some more comments in here, like initial pickup, and then ongoing. So we've got extra little things just telling us what each part does in case we come back and go, I have no idea what's going on. So we've got ourselves a functional green candle. But we still can't find it because we'd have to go into the item pool manager and then do all sorts of runs. It's just a pain. So we're going to cheat. Again. So we're going to tell Isaac to spawn one for us. We did this with the little batteries. It's pretty much the same thing. So we have the entity type, entity underscore pick up, which is the same as for the little battery, but it's a different variant. Pick up variant dot pick up collectible. And then, well, for the subvariant, it's the item number, which is green candle dot collectible green candle. Okay. Then we need to spell this properly. That could be a problem. And then we need a position, a vector, and then a spawner. So vector of 320, 300. We'll put it at a nice place in the room. Then vector 00. We'll make it not moving, and then nil will say nobody spawned it, it's just there. So all that again is Isaac.spawn, the pickup, or the entity type, so we use the enum for entity pickup, the pickup variant, pickup collectible, the pickup subvariant is the item number itself, green candle.collectible green candle, and then we've got vector 320, 300, vector 00, and nowhere. So this is the position, this is its speed, and this is who spawned it, which is nobody. And there we are. You save it, and we've got a fully complete green candle on one view. 31 lines. It's good to go. Probably. Anytime you're coding, you might have made a mistake. It's real easy to misspell things. It's real easy to miscapitalize things. it's real easy to do all sorts of things. So one thing that could benefit you greatly in your work is Isaac.debug string. And then you hand it a string. What this does is it takes some text and throws it into the log file. Now, where do you find that log file? Well, if you go to My Games and then Afterbirth Plus, right here is log.txt. And if you open it up in Notepad++, it's a whole lot of information that tells you about the game that's running. I put in a little bit of debug text myself that told me that I, in fact, had the candle, because sometimes it was being a little weird. So if anything goes wrong, you can put this in to see the various things that could be going on. Make sure you got to where you need to get to. And also, if you have an error, like a syntax error, when you're over in Isaac, let's actually head back over there. When you go to your mods, it'll actually say old, and it'll turn it red. So if you get that, it's because you've got a syntax error, and you need to go to your log file and see what happened. It'll tell you the exact line that it happened on, so you can come in here and just track it down and go, okay, I know exactly where the problem is. I don't know what it is, but I know where it is. It's a very important thing, and debugging is going to happen now. You're at a point where there's enough code that something is gonna go wrong. I wouldn't be at all surprised if something goes wrong for me right now. But, well, we gotta save it, and since Isaac was running when we created it, it doesn't actually show up. So I'm gonna have to exit Isaac and come back on into it. So let's get on out of Isaac and start it back up. Okay, and we're back. Okay, and we've got ourselves a green candle mod. Here's hoping it works. I don't know where the music went. I have some sort of hotkey that makes it mute. Could be Control M, could be Shift M, could be M, could be both. Either way, let's get that music back. It really bugs me when it's not there. Okay, so we've got ourselves a green candle. Let's pick it up. It's got a soul heart. Let's go find some enemies. Hello, enemies. Hey, he's poisoned. And they're poisoned. So this was a magnificent triumph in typing things correctly. And now you can just go around killing things, and sometimes they get poisoned. And well, we're still immortal. Oh, right, we're not immortal anymore because this is not Lorem Ipsum. This is just regular old green candle. So you see, it's over there in the heads-up display. But there is one thing that I still don't know how we're going to accomplish. And that's here in this menu here with my stuff. See that little eyeball? Yeah, that's not our item. I don't know where we specify that. I did find the file that includes that sprite, but it's a sprite map. Like, it's one file for all items. And no matter what I add to it, it still just uses that. I don't know if they're going to add it later, but for now, I don't know how to change that. That's the only real shortcoming we have at the moment. So I know this has been a long episode, but we have a fully functional, ready to be uploaded item. It's a nice item. It does a couple of interesting things, and it's taught you a couple of interesting things. So now we know how to do loops. For a thing counts from a number to another number, and then it does some stuff, and then it ends. Or you go for an index and a thing showing up in pairs, and then do some stuff, and then end. When it gets to end, it loops back around, around, around. We learned ifs. If some condition is true or false, well, that's this whole condition, this and that, then you do stuff. And we learned about randomness, rolling dice. It's a lot of things to learn. We learned how to add soul hearts. We learned how to add poison. You've learned a lot in this episode. I'm glad you stayed till the end because it's a lot to take in, but it's really useful. And it's good to make good, responsible items that you know exactly when you have them and exactly when you don't. So you start off not, and then you do, and you keep knowing it. So you have single initiation and ongoing effects. This is a lot to take in. I know. Thank you for sticking around. I'm glad my voice stuck around as long as it did. Sorry for any coughs. The next episode will involve stat upgrades or downgrades. Take your pick. And that will use a lot of the skills here. And so hopefully that episode will be a bit shorter. But I will see you in the next episode of the Modding of Isaac with Lyte.